History tells the story of the world and of our lives. Sometimes that history goes bump in the night. Broadcasting from the center of oddity and the supernatural in Central Florida, it's the History Goes Bump podcast.
Hello, you spectacular people. Welcome to this 570th episode of the History Goes Bump podcast, Ghost Tours for the Theater of the Mind. I am your host, Diane.
And this is Kelly.
Kelly, on this episode, we have a location that was suggested to us by our listener, Savannah Marchione, and that is the Aiken-Rhett House in Charleston. She's actually been there, and so she's going to join us to share a bit about the history and some of her own haunting experiences she's had there.
I can't wait to bring this to the listeners.
Yeah, it's got some very interesting stuff going on here. Before we get into that, we want to welcome into the spectacular crew, Nancy, Rebecca, Jeff, Amelia, and Misty.
Thank you so much for joining the spectacular crew.
And now, this moment in Oddity.
The moment in Oddity was suggested by Michael Rogers. In Wuppertal, Germany, there is a semi-unique mode of transportation. There are many suspended public transit railways around the world. However, the Wuppertal train is one of only two that actually operates upside down. Dubbed the Wuppertal Schwebebahn, it is the oldest elevated railway with hanging cars. The cars themselves are constructed with extruded aluminum and fiberglass composite. Each individual car weighs just under 25 tons. The train transports approximately 80,000 passengers every day, and the entire route only takes about 30 minutes to travel from end to end, gliding a distance of 8.3 miles. The route itself offers beautiful views of the Wupper River for 6 of those miles at a mere 39 feet above the water's surface. There are 20 stations along the course, some of which display Art Nouveau architecture. It is a very popular mode of transportation for both locals as well as tourists. For those without a fear of falling,
which would not be me.
The Schwebebahn provides an awesome adventure, albeit admittedly alarming for some, and this manner of transportation certainly is odd.
Hello, this is Victoria from victoriaslift.com. When I'm not taking those who must choose their destiny for a ride on the lift, I'm listening to History Goes Bump podcast. History isn't boring, it's terrifying. The past remains with us, and so do its spirits. Can you hear them calling? They want you to know their stories. Listen now to their voices and the truth from the past.
And now this month in history.
In the month of January on the 1st in 1915, the British battleship HMS Formidable was sunk. The ship was out on exercises about 37 miles off the Devon coast, when suddenly the first of 2 torpedoes from German U-boat 24 hit the Formidable's number 1 boiler on the port side. The second torpedo hit the starboard side near the bow. The explosions caused the ship to list heavily to its starboard side, while large 30-foot waves crashed over the damaged ship. The captain, his second-in-command, and a signaller stayed at their posts as the ship began taking on water. They sent flares and rockets off at regular intervals, hoping to alert other ships for rescue. It is said that nobody panicked. While lifeboats were being lowered, someone played a ragtime song on the piano and others sang. Without warning, the ship gave an enormous lurch. With that, the captain exclaimed, "Lads, this is the last, all hands for themselves, and may God bless you and guide you to safety." The captain then walked to the foreship with his dog and waited for the inevitable. Many lifeboats were destroyed as they were lowered, while still others sank due to the size of the waves. One of the lifeboats, known as a pinnace, or small boat with sails or oars, was spotted from land by a girl and her parents. The alarm was raised, and thus rescue efforts began. Of the nearly 750 men, only 199 were saved. Wow.
The Aiken-Rhett House is located in Charleston, South Carolina. This is a partially restored house museum that can be toured and was a home that remained in the Aiken family for 142 years. Some of their furnishings remain, as do some of their spirits. Our listener, Savannah Marchione, suggested this location to us, and she joins us to share about the history of the house and her own paranormal experiences that she has had while touring the house.
For us, Charleston is synonymous with great old mansions. The city is very similar to Natchez, Mississippi in that respect. This is a place you come to see these beautiful and distinctive mansions. They're all very different. We'll sprinkle in a few here and there throughout this episode. The Aiken-Rhett mansion isn't opulent anymore. It isn't even completely refurbished, but it has its own distinct beauty in its unfinished state. One can imagine what it had been like at its prime in the early 1800s, when grand parties were thrown here. This mansion captured our listener Savannah's heart. Well, we are joined by Savannah Marchione, and she is one of our listeners. We've had you at a live show with us. You did a tour of the
USS Yorktown.
Yes, with us, which was very cool. And you said, hey, you guys need to check out this place called the Aiken-Rhett Mansion. It's a museum today. And so I went in and I was looking at you must have sent me, it was 68 pictures or something. And I was like, wow,
Yeah.
This is a big place. It's in Charleston. And we've never seen it there before. And usually when you think of a mansion in Charleston, you're going to go visit one. They've already been completely renovated and they're all fancy on the inside. This one is partially done. I guess you could say there's a lot of work that still hasn't been done, which I think makes it pretty cool because then you get it closer to kind of what it was like originally.
Yeah, that's kind of what their plan was, is they wanted to keep it as close to how it was back in the 1820s and 30s. They've done very minimal restoration to it. So it's like all the paint that you see chipping, that's the original paint, the wallpaper, the original roofing, the ceilings and everything. The house has no AC or no heat. There's only one room, which is the art gallery, that's going to have the AC and the heat in it to keep all the paint and all the sculptures intact. But the rest of the house, it's got very minimal electricity. The basement, what we would call it today, is the only room that has electricity in it. But the rest of the house, they just open up the shutters, and that's how you get your daylight to walk around through it during the day.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
So how did you find out about this house?
Like I do most things, my tour guide, who I have fallen in love with from doing the cemetery tours, if she has anything that's a haunted location, she pretty much is I'm the first person she'll, hey, go here, go here, go here. This house, the Aiken-Rhett House, is kind of off of, when you first come downtown from the interstate, from our major interstate in Charleston, we're tucked back off the street, so you don't know it's back there. So you have to go past a huge museum and you keep going downtown, and that's where you're going to get into the heart of the city. But this house is it's 2 blocks off of Meeting Street, and it's tucked back in the corner, and it's in a residential area. So when you go past the small park, you see this huge house, and that's kind of what draws you into it. And it looks like it's falling apart, but you're kind of just like, wait, what's that over there? It kind of looks like a castle. I want to go investigate. So they only do daytime tours, and it's $15. And then they send you an email that has an audio link to it. So either they put your headphones in and you do a self-guided tour. They have 4 docents, and they're all cousins of the Aiken family. So they do the tours. Yeah, they do the tours for the house, and they do it 4 times a day. But if not, you can just literally just do a self-guided tour and walk around. They do it, set it up for you, but it's still a self-guided tour where you can kind of listen to as you want. You can kind of skip through boring or cool parts, or you can kind of linger around as you want to. I did it 3 or 4 times, and I still find stuff that I'm like, wait, I didn't see that last time, or that got moved, or that wasn't there before.
When you use the word huge, that is right. Because when I looked at these pictures, I'm like, this place is huge. And they describe it kind of like it's a townhouse complex. But now this was just one family home. Is that correct?
Technically, yeah. It was a 2-story double Charleston home is when John Robinson had built it back in 1820. But technically, as today, it'd be like a 3 or 4 family home. It's got 23 bedrooms and it's 22,000 square feet with 2 houses out in the backyard, which would be the horse stall and then the slave quarters.
And it's cool that those are still there because at a lot of properties like this, those are gone.
No, yeah, definitely, especially in the South. Well, I mean, it depends on the house in the South, but mostly in the South, those are pretty much gone because of, the past and the history of what those houses were used for.
6 years before John Robinson built what became the Aiken-Rhett House, he built the house that still carries his name at 10 Judith Street. Savannah will share that this merchant ran into financial issues, but through it all, he held on to this house, which is considerably smaller than the Aiken-Rhett House at just 6,000 square feet and 2.5 stories with a raised basement. It features double piazzas and an iron staircase leading to the front door. This home was later owned by Commander Peter Stevens, who led the Citadel Cadets at Fort Johnson against the Union at Fort Sumter. It was Stevens who ordered the shots at the Star of the West, a resupply ship sent by President Lincoln to Fort Sumter. This act is considered by some to be the first shot of the Civil War. So this was originally built in 1820, you said?
It was built in 1820 by John Robinson, and it's located at 48 Elizabeth Street in Charleston. John had built it, and he was like a merchant, and then he had lost like 5 ships due to just storms and whatnot. And then he had a lot of financial obligations, so then he wanted to sell the house because he couldn't afford it. So that was when William Aiken Sr. bought the house. And then when he bought it, the house stayed in the family for 142 years. And then they finally sold it. And I think the family sold it in 1950 to Charleston. And that was when Charleston turned into a museum.
Another incredible thing about it, 142 years in the same family.
That's amazing.
I think it was like 4 or 5 generations that lived in the house. Because William Aiken and his wife, Henrietta, bought the house in 1828. And then in 1831, William Sr. passed away in an accident, for the carriage accident. So then his wife, Henrietta, and William Jr. lived in the house. And then William Jr. and his wife moved into the house. And then they had a daughter. The daughter, Henrietta, after the mother. There's a lot of recurring names. So I'm going to do my best with what I could. Yeah.
I just want to clarify something here. It's very confusing when you have William Sr. was married to Henrietta. William Jr. was married to Harriet. They named their daughter after William Jr.'s mother, Henrietta. So hopefully you don't get too confused in all of this here. I just wanted to clarify that.
So William and Henrietta had 2 kids, but the one son didn't make it past childhood. So then William Jr. moved into the house. So William Jr. was a rice planter. He was governor of Charleston, and then he did a lot of other political stuff for South Carolina. In his day and age, in 1830s, he was one of the wealthiest citizens that lived in the state. So he did a lot for his community and whatnot, and liked to travel. So then William Jr. and his wife liked to travel, so they would go to Germany a lot. And then they would collect a lot of like artwork and sculptures, and that was what you find in the art room today. William Jr. had his cousin, Joseph Daniel Aiken, design and oversee the construction of an art gallery inside the home, and was the only one of the magnitude that's in Charleston. And so because of that, that's where they started all of their furnishings, all their expensive, lavish stuff that they didn't want to get ruined in the rest of the house, because back then, obviously, they didn't have the luxuries like what we have today is heat, air, stuff like that, central coolingness, especially living in Charleston, it's really hot.
Yeah, so basically what Savannah is pointing out there is that they had this specialized art gallery built, and it was kind of climate controlled. So they would like to keep all of their really nice furnishings in there as well. Especially when they would leave town, they would make sure to put the stuff in there to keep it safe. When William Jr. and his wife Harriet obtained the house, they began to make several alterations to the property. The main entry moved from Judith Street to Elizabeth Street, and a new foyer was created. An eastern wing was added, as was a large dining room on the first floor with a ballroom added above it. The central hallway was closed. Several outbuildings were added with Gothic Revival styling, and these included a cowshed, chicken coop, and matching corner privies, because why have only one when you can have 2 and matching? I mean, come on, this is the South. Of course, another slave quarters was added, and this is the bad part of the Aiken history, as William Jr. was one of the largest slaveholders in South Carolina. He had a plantation on Johese Island with 700 slaves. The house kept around 19 slaves. While Aiken supported the Confederacy, he was not in favor of secession.
Yeah, the families pretty much lived in the house. And then I think in 1848, Henrietta Sr. passed away. And so then the kids stayed in the house. And then in 1887, William Jr. passed away in Flat Rock, North Carolina, and they were on vacation. They had 4 kids, and then 2 of the 4 kids surpassed the adulthood. So the 2 sons were Aiken-Rhett, which Ion is a little community in Mount Pleasant now that he founded as he got older. So just when we went across the Ravenel Bridge to go to the Yorktown, if you keep going, think south like 5-10 minutes, you'll get into Ion, and that's where he kind of had a little plantation in that area. So then he lived there, and then Ion and Andrew kept up with the house into the mid-20th century. They sold the house to Charleston. That's when Charleston took over, created a museum out of it.
Very neat.
It's three stories, and the 3rd floor is completely blocked off, so you can't get up there because they have a lot of rotting wood that they're trying to see if they can salvage or try to put like epoxy down so you can walk up there.
Yeah, you don't want to fall through to the 2nd floor. Definitely not.
No,
It would make for interesting, I guess, decor to have legs, hanging out of the ceiling down onto the 2nd floor.
Yeah.
There's a lot of furnishings in there. Is it all original? Is it partially original stuff?
So the best way I can describe it, the stuff that if you actually look at the pictures and if you walk through the house, the stuff that looks dusted is new, but the stuff that isn't dusted is original furnishing. So that's how I had one of the ladies who I was talking to had told me, she goes, pretty much everything that's dusted is stuff that we put in the house, which I think is a total of like 15 items. And then the rest of it is pretty much what they originally put in the house.
Wow, that's a lot of original furnishings for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So they didn't have, and then obviously the sink, and there's a sink and then there's a little tub thing that are up on the 2nd floor. Obviously the sink got put in, I think, when they bought the house, but the tub, I think they had bought from France and transported. So Henrietta Sr., that was pretty much her bathroom, and she liked to stay in that bathroom. So they had a well that was on the property toward the back of the property. So the slaves would have, I think it was a 10-gallon tub. So they would have to go to the well, get the water, boil it, and then carry up to the 2nd floor to give her bath. So that was definitely, that room is definitely a really interesting room.
Now, did any family members die in the house?
There's not full records, but there have been a few deaths. There was 2 slaves that were emancipated but decided to stay in the house because of financial reasons. The Aikens pretty much opened up the house and said, well, if even though y'all are emancipated, y'all are welcome to stay. Y'all can move into the house because y'all are now free. I know one decided to hang himself out. There's one picture that has doors going up, but there's no stairs. Those stairs had caught fire the year prior. So one of the gentlemen had decided to get a rope and then go running out the doors, killed himself that way. Unfortunately, they don't know why, and there's no real records on that. And then there was another emancipated slave that had lived in the house that had passed away, but I think it was of natural causes. Both Henrietta's and Harriet, I think, passed away in the house, and then 3 children had passed away in the house.
So that first one, that was an enslaved individual who hanged himself?
Yes, ma'am.
And was this after they were freed?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, I wonder why he would do that after you finally got your freedom. Huh.
I tried to dig through the records, but because the cousins still work there, they don't really like to indulge in the information as much. They kind of just go, well, that's all we know, and that's really about it.
Oh. So. I'm trying to remember from some of the pictures that you sent. It seems like they have some carriages that are still in the carriage house?
So they have the one carriage, and then they have the car. I forget what the car is called, but it was pretty much like the first car that was invented in America. There was like a motorized buggy or a motorized something, a Dura motor carriage, Duryea. They had owned 2 of those, but I think one of the kids had taken one of the cars when they moved out, and then they kept the other one belonged to Harrietta, so I think it kept staying in the house. And that one's still in the barn, and then they have one of the regular carriages that are still in the barn from the horses.
And it sounds like this was set up like a lot of the carriage houses back then, that the upstairs part of it was living quarters for servants or what have you, whoever took care of the horses and the carriages and stuff.
Yeah, they don't have much records on the gentleman who it was. It was a white gentleman who was a family friend of theirs, and they just let him live upstairs and he take care of the horses, but there's not a whole lot of records on who this guy was.
And they had several family members who died. Did they bury them on the property? Is there a family cemetery, or did
Not
they bury them
that
in the
I
city?
can see, but I think they probably got buried in the city, knowing how big the Aiken-Rhett family was in the community. They probably got buried at the Circular Congregation Church. I know there was a couple Rhett family members out in Magnolias, but I'm sure most of them probably got buried within the city.
Okay.
And now a little break for a word about one of our sponsors.
You have told us, of course, we're talking about this place, so it has to have some stories going on there that are related to ghost activity. Is this something that the house embraces, or do they just kind of hush hush about it? Or
They're very, very hush hush about it, but I think because I know a lot of tour guides, so they hear a lot of the chattering and the clattering of, what happens with the haunted parts. So I get to kind of hear a lot of the background noise of what happens. But now, if you go up and ask about it, they pretty much will tell you, no, it's not haunted. The house it's not haunted at all. It's just an old historic house, and that's it.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Exactly. And they get a couple of the family members will get kind of, oh, what do you mean it's haunted? It's like, okay, like
Let's get real here.
Yeah, I'm not dumb here. I'm not from the South. I lived in the city for 25 years. I think I know where the haunted locations are at this point. You can tell me, it'll be okay.
Sarah Pitzer wrote the book Haunted Charleston, Scary Sights, Eerie Encounters, and Tall Tales, and she writes about the Aiken-Rhett House in there, and she shares the experiences of a woman named Judy. This was a woman who had come to Charleston to study its historic preservation sites. She was not ghost hunting, not looking for ghosts of any kind. And she heard that the Aiken-Rhett House was an outstanding example of preservation versus renovation. So kind of like how we've been explaining, they haven't completely refurbished the house. She was the first tourist to be admitted to the Aiken-Rhett House at 10 a.m. one Monday morning. She followed the tape-recorded tour guide and marveled at how much there was to see. She knew the story told by Ed Macy and Julian Buxton III about the experiences of two architects who were in the building after dark in 1989. They had worked much of the summer measuring and describing the building in detail to create an official record for the Historical American Building Survey, and had returned only to check the mansion's monitoring system. As one last chore before they quit, the two men headed to the second floor to close the windows in the ballroom because the security monitors had detected wind blowing in. When they hit the stairs, they were stopped by an ear-piercing noise that got painfully louder as they went up. It seemed to be coming from the ballroom, where the door was rattling noisily. Some of us might have turned tail and hustled back down the stairs because it was late and dark, but the architects did not. So clearly, they are ghost hunters at heart, because that is exactly what we would do. They were young men. There were two of them, and they had flashlights. And if you got flashlights, you can beat anything, right? When they touched the door, the noise stopped, and inside the ballroom, all was as it should have been. Windows closed, no wind at all. They walked around the ballroom using their flashlights just to make sure everything was okay. Everything looked normal until they saw something moving reflected in the mirror. They heard sobbing that seemed to go on and on. Then they saw the image of an old woman in the mirror. She had long white hair that blew about as if the wind they'd heard earlier was pummeling her, and her face was awful in its anguish. Her mouth was wide open and her eyes were staring straight ahead. She put her hands against her cheeks and wailed until she quivered. That's what the men saw, but they did not hear anything at all. Her scream, like the wind now, was silent. Can you imagine a silent scream? It was one of those old stories that had passed among architects for a while, but Judy didn't take it seriously. She was an architect too, and she thought some of those young guys would have been capable of amusing themselves with a story like that. She was entirely neutral on the whole notion of ghosts existing. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't, who knows? Besides, all that had happened in 1989, and it was now 2011. Ownership of the house had passed from the Charleston Museum to the Historic Charleston Foundation. She'd heard that visitors sometimes heard unexplained sounds or saw the pale form of a woman drifting about, but she didn't take any of it seriously. She was there for the architecture after all. Although she admired what remained of the fine old art and furnishings, Judy did not give much thought to the notion that family spirits remained in the house. Then in the East Drawing Room, she came upon the portrait of Harriet Aiken, painted in her glory days as the wife of Governor William Aiken, Jr. It was a larger-than-life depiction showing a beautiful woman in a tasteful but impressive off-the-shoulder gown, with a lacy overlay softly cinched at the waist, sweeping the floor. Harriet's long dark hair was parted down the middle and drawn loosely back over her ears, with a feather ornament in the back. She looked wealthy, confident, almost stern. Judy stopped at the painting for a long time. In addition to architecture, her passions included textiles and clothing. This gown was something she might never see elsewhere. She knew photography was not allowed in the museum, so she made some sketches. This took a while. When Judy looked up one more time as she was finishing, the woman in the portrait was staring directly at her. Judy was unnerved. Something in the portrait was trying to tell her something, and it did not feel to Judy like it was anything pleasant. One doesn't have to believe in ghosts to know when a woman is staring down at her. Judy definitely did not want to engage. Besides, it was almost lunchtime, which suited her just fine. She hightailed it out of the museum in search of a good Charleston meal. She decided to steer clear of Poogan's porch because she'd heard it was haunted. The food is amazing, and come on, a little ghost while you're eating some she-crab soup or shrimp and grits. I think it just enhances it. Judy's focus had been on the museum's interior, but other people have reported strange sightings and even photographed some outside the building. 2 entries on the Grave Addiction website mention other oddities seen but not heard here. In June 2006, J.R. Davis posted a note about a face he thought he'd identified in the remnants of paint on an exterior wall of the slave quarters. He circled it on the digital photo. A little later, he posted a second note saying he'd found 2 more faces, which he circled, making 3 in all, 1 large and 2 smaller. But as we know, pictures, paint on a wall, pareidolia, so I wouldn't really trust that. A man named John Ferguson took photographs outside looking into the mansion just before going inside for a wedding reception. One photo shows an ornately decorated room, another a second-floor balcony with a window behind it. Something unidentified fills a corner of the window in each photo. Ferguson says his pictures show a male figure in a 3-cornered hat at the window, though nobody who was there at the time saw this man. Ferguson felt sure that what he'd seen wasn't a regular guest, because the apparition was in period costume, and this was a wedding reception, not a costume ball. An older Charleston woman who volunteers once a week at the Aiken-Rhett House said, "I've known this house all my life, and I've never seen a ghost." But she admits that Harriet looks directly at her from within that huge, elaborate frame on the wall. What does the volunteer do when she sees that? Why, I just smile and say hello.
One lady that works there, and I haven't seen her in a while, but she's probably in her mid-30s, and she happened to overhear me ask one day, and she found me outside, and I was taking pictures, and she came and talked to me, and she had 2 experiences. Well, she still has experiences, but she had 2 that stood out to her the most. And there was one that just kind of horrified her beyond belief. So the house opens at 10:30, but they don't have to come in at 10 to get all the doors open, the windows open, the shutters open, and kind of, make sure everything's neat and clean one last week before the guests come in. And she was by herself, and she said it was probably like into April, so it was still springtime. So she was sweeping off some of the leaves on the foyer. So she went inside to go to the second floor. She was in the bathroom, and there's one door that goes this way and one that goes that way. So she was going out this door, and she had heard like clattering. So she kind of just thought maybe it was a bird flying through or something, because that kind of happens sometimes. And then, so she had happened to turn to look over her shoulder, and she saw the back of a blonde-haired woman going out the other door. Well, she went out to the patio, and there's stairs that go down from those patio that go back into the ballroom. Then you can go from the ballroom to the outside. So she kind of was like, hey, well, there's no one else in here with me. Well, there's always been stories from those of us who like to ghost hunt and are very into ghosts know that Harrietta loved that bathroom, and that's, you can hear her humming, and she'll kind of close the doors in that bathroom, or she'll open the shutter. She's been known to kind of stay in that area, because that's what, back then bathrooms were such a huge deal. Unlike us, bathrooms are like, okay, yeah, we're just go pee, go potties, go do whatever you need to go do. And
it was a luxury.
It was a luxury for them. So back then, I'm sure having a huge clawed porcelain bathtub was like, oh, God, I'm in heaven. So her name was Linda. So she was going out, she saw this lady go down the outside to the porch and go down the stairs. So Linda's like, okay, well, maybe I can cut this person off going into the ballroom. Well, there's a lot of things that happen in the ballroom. There's a huge, huge mirror that I think was dated from the 1860s that they had gotten in France or in Paris. I don't remember which one. And it hung in the dining room. Well, a lot of people see reflections in a blonde-haired woman in that mirror. So Linda had got about halfway down the stairs and she saw the lady come in from the back porch into the dining room and saw her get into the dining room. Well, as she went to go look back down and take steps, she saw a black figure run from the dining room in front of the staircases and out the double doors to get to the backyard where the double doors are that is sitting in the middle of the house where there's no stairs. And I'll get back to that in a minute. So then as she went to go look back into the dining room, she saw the lady in the mirror, no face, nothing. And so
no.
stopped. And then as soon as she heard the shutters from the back of the house shut, she heard screaming coming from behind her. It says she bolted out that front door so fast and went across the street and just sat there. And she goes, I sat there for an hour and a half until the next lady came to open. I had 3 guests because I had 3 guests come up to the door. She goes, we're closed. You're going to have to wait. I'm not going back.
I'm not going in there.
You're going to have to wait. She goes, I'll refund you, y'all, whatever y'all want. She goes, I'll refund you your tickets or come back later. So then finally they came and she said the whole time she sat there for an hour and a half, she could hear the shutters opening and closing.
Oh, wow.
And that she could hear doors in the house. And I mean, these doors weighed, it's not like our doors now, boy, they weigh like 2 pounds.
Yeah.
These doors weigh 30, 40 pounds because they were solid oak wood doors and you could hear them slamming through the house. Well, of course, there's no air conditioning. There's no heat. There's no circulation in the house. There's no air there's wind, but she said there was no wind that day. She goes, there was nothing in that house to cause those doors to close by themselves unless you're pulling them. She goes, and most times it takes, she goes, I can do it by myself because I'm in my mid-30s, but she goes, most of our ladies that open in the morning had to have 2 of them just to open the door because they're so heavy. So she goes, you could hear the clattering through the house. You could hear the doors closing. And she goes, I sat there for an hour and a half and it said, nope, I'll wait until someone else comes and opens the door for me. And
Oh, my word.
She was the one who had told me that the slave had hung himself and those were the doors that open and then shut by themselves. And that was the door that the black figure had bolted out of. So she thinks that maybe that was him running from maybe Henrietta or running from whatever it was that was in the dining room trying to get away. So no one knows.
It's interesting that you came back to that because I was going to ask you when you said that this black figure had gone through these shutters, I was going to say, well, was it that it went through them, or did they open and close? Well, now you answered it for me clearly, opening and closing several times. So it's like he's coming in and out, which makes you wonder, was it something residual? And that's why it's constantly like she kept hearing it coming in and out because it was just running this route
Yeah. And people have heard humming throughout the house. They've heard the shutters closing. They've taken pictures. And I Googled and tried to search for these pictures. And they said that they've taken pictures and there's been ghostly figures standing in the room with them. Again, I don't know how true that is because I can't find any of it. And I don't know if it's just because the family does that well of a job to keep the pictures down off the internet and not keep them up. That could be a possibility. It's hard to say, but I know that when I was in the slave quarters, the first time I've ever went in the house, like first walk into the door, you literally feel like you're going back in the 1800s. You literally feel like you're walking back in time because the house is literally has it how it used to be. So when you're walking, you're just like taken back going, oh my God, like, is it still like the 2020s? Like, I don't know. So I had walked through the house. You go through the basement and they spit you outside. You do the outside. I walked up to the slave quarters and you walk in through the kitchen because obviously back then the kitchen was detached from the house because they didn't want the house to catch fire. So I had walked into the house, the kitchen, and I kind of just felt uneasy. I was like, something doesn't really, it kind of feels sad and a little angry in here. So I kind of was like a little hesitant to kind of like walk through and kind of, keep going. I walked through the kitchen and then you go upstairs to get to, there's 3 rooms and they had 20 slaves that they would keep in the slave quarters and there was 3 rooms. And these rooms weren't very big rooms. They're like each room was the size of maybe like a spare room. So then I had walked upstairs and you go from one end to the other end. Well, I started at the far end first. And as I went further and further down the hall, it started to feel heavier. So I got to this halfway between the first room there and the second room. And I just stopped and I just go, okay, I don't know who's here. I feel someone. I'm not here to hurt you. There's a history tour. I just want to take the history tour. I just want to learn about the house and the education. And I'm not here to hurt you. If something happened, I promise I will leave in 5 minutes. I just want to see what's in this room. And then I promise I'll walk out and I'll leave you alone. So I felt the weight lift and I could hear the steppings go down the stairs. I was like, okay, I go, whoever that was, thank you. I go, I promise in 5 minutes, I'll be out of your section. If not, you can come and scare me again and that'll let me know that I'm beyond my 5 minutes. So then I hurried up, I went around and then I went to the in room and you could just feel like a negative energy. I was like, I don't think I'm going to stay here. And then I heard 2 steps and I go, okay, I'm coming. I know it's been 6 minutes. I go, I'm coming. I'm coming right now. I promise. So then I heard it go back downstairs. I was like, I'm coming right now. I go, just hold your ponies, okay? So then I went back downstairs and I kind of immediately felt like, okay, I feel better. I don't feel that dense feeling. And then I went over into the horse area and it kind of just, there's a lot of, they're trying to dig up a lot of the dirt to see if there's any artifacts and stuff like that. And I kind of happened to look over my shoulder back at the house. I was kind of like, let me look at the slide quarters again. And I kind of saw a dark figure dart past the window. It was like, you're the one that's been watching me. I go, I think it's you. I was like, let me go inside. I go, I think he doesn't want me back. Because at this point, I was by myself. I was the first one in the house. So I was like, maybe they're just kind of waking up because the house is now open and whatnot. So maybe they just don't know why this crazy lady is walking through their house. So then I went back up, I went inside, I went upstairs and I got to the bathroom, the Henrietta's bathroom. I was like, oh my God, this is so cool. Like it was an in-ground tub at first. And then that's when they had the porcelain tub and they had the gown where you would put the gown on to steam it and clean it and, get it firm and stuff like that. And all of a sudden I hear, and I had one headphone in and I'm listening. So I was like, oh, maybe they have music. So I was like, okay, whatever. Maybe I'm just, I'm waiting for the next scene. I'm kind of looking around and then the recording went quiet because it was going on to the next chapter. And then I heard the humming again and it was on the other side of the bathroom. I was like, okay, I know I'm hard of hearing. So I took my headphone out and I kind of stood there. And then I heard high heels. And then I heard humming. And I kind of just go, is someone else in here? So I kind of realized that the bathroom looped around. So I was like, let me go loop around and see what's going on. So I looped around. I didn't see anyone. There was no one in that area. And the bedrooms are on the second floor are pretty big. So I was like, let me look around this bedroom and the next bedroom. I didn't see anyone. And you have to ring the doorbell to get into the house. So I was like, oh, maybe it's the doorbell and I'm hearing the doorbell. So I poked my head over the rail. And I was like, hey, is anyone else in the house? She goes, the lady downstairs goes, no, ma'am, you're the only one. So I was like, okay. So I walked back into the bathroom and I was like, let me just sit here for 5 minutes. So I literally just sat down and I was crisscrossed. And all of a sudden I hear and I have a 3-year-old. So I know what a toddler is running sounds like. So I heard one set go and then I heard another set go the other way. I was like, okay, well, there's kids. And I remember I was like, okay, well, they had little boys. There was 4 boys. Okay, maybe it's one of the little boys. And then I was like, okay, let me go ahead and get up and go to the next room. So now I hear the humming again. And I go to turn around and they're walking out the other way of the bathroom was the blonde-haired woman.
Oh,
so
hell
like,
no. Oh, my God.
So I really just I stop and I just go, let me go on they have the front patios. I forget what they're called. I can't remember what they're called.
Like a veranda?
The veranda. So no, we just on the veranda and just kind of sit out there. So then I immediately just ran out. I was like, I don't feel good. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this right now. And so then I was like, I don't have any of my stuff on me. So then I went outside on the porch. And then literally as soon as I sat on one of the chairs, I could hear the click. I was like, I'm going back downstairs. I go, let me go sit in the dining room or the ballroom. I'll sit there and stare at the freaking mirror. I was like, I don't think I want to do upstairs anymore. So then I ran downstairs and there was a little girl who was little to me because I'm older. She was 16 or 17. And so she goes, are you okay? I was like, yeah. I go, I'm okay. I go, I'm just going to sit down here for a minute. She goes, you heard her too. I was like, what?
That's
like,
probably
wait.
She probably already had you pegged when you went, am I the only person in the house? She's like, she's hearing something.
Yeah. So then she goes, you heard Miss Henrietta. I was like, back up. I was like, back up. Hang on. I go, Miss Henrietta? I go, the blonde lady? She goes, yeah, that's the original lady of the house. I was like, oh, no. I was like, I don't play with this. I go, nope, I'm good. I go, the main woman of the household, the back in the day are scary people. I was like, nope, I'm good. I'll pass. I go, I'll sit down here. So she goes, oh, she was like, Miss Henrietta's a great lady. I was like, maybe to you because she knows you, but I'm an outsider. She doesn't know me. I'll sit down here, but thank you anyways.
And now a little break for a word about one of our sponsors.
I had went back 2 or 3 times and I had different things happen and I heard the humming. So then I was like, okay, wife, I think she's just going through her daily cycles of when she was alive. So I don't think she even honestly knows I'm standing here because she's probably just going through her daily routines of chasing the boys and going in and out of her bathroom, getting dressed for whatever was going down in the city that day. So she probably has no idea I'm sitting there. It was kind of interesting. And then I hear a lot of stories from people saying that they hear the humming, they hear the high heels clacking, they hear the little boys running through the house, and they hear the shutters closing and this and that. So I'm just kind of like, yeah, that house is haunted.
Very cool.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like it's got a ton of residual stuff going on. It'd be really cool to be able to do an investigation in there and see if something was a little bit more intelligent. She clearly wasn't meaning you any harm if she's humming.
No, definitely
like she was
not.
cursing at you or telling you to get out.
No high heels stuck into the tip of your toe or anything.
Forehead,
No.
Wow, that is so cool because, most people don't get the chance to see a full-bodied apparition. And so for you to see that and for it to be something that you've heard about, like people have seen this blonde figure in there, it's like, oh, I'm not imagining things here. This is...
No.
And that's a lot of stuff to have going on all at once with you. Usually people are like, oh, I heard some humming for a minute and then it was like, that was it. Or I heard some disembodied footsteps and they walked down the hall and then that was it. But you're like, oh, I heard some humming and then I'm looking around and I hear some more humming and then I hear some disembodied footsteps and then I hear some kids running around. It's like, wow, you were in the middle of something.
So cool.
Yeah.
And that young girl, the teenager, she's probably sits in there all the time going, oh gosh, please don't let me hear something while I'm sitting here by myself.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, guys, after I was done with everything, I was asking her about the third floor, and she goes, there's 15 small bedrooms up on the 3rd floor, and that's where all the kids would live. And if they had family in town, they would go upstairs. And she goes, we're trying to get it redone and fixed and whatnot. But she goes, it's a lot of money and this and that. But of course, it's just how Charleston rolls and no different than St. Augustine. And so she goes, yeah, the family doesn't like to talk about it because the Aiken cousins refuse to believe that Henrietta died in the house. No, they won't release any records. It's hard to say, well, we don't know exactly where they died. We just know the year and the date of when they died, but they don't know how they died. They don't know what it was. We just know of William Sr. died of the carriage accident, and that's the only death certificate that's been released besides William Jr.'s, who had died in North Carolina. But everyone else, you can't find any records of their death or what happened, if it was an ailment or if it was old age. But she says that the family holds tight onto a lot of stuff and they don't release it and they don't want to release it. And I don't know why, but I think because they're still docents on the house. So I think because they're allowed to have that right because it's the legal last name and they still have ramifications to all that. So I mean, I get it, but I'm kind of like, just release it to the public so we can know. And they're just like, no, we don't want to release anything. So
yeah, it's such a bummer.
I think there's something darker going on in that house that maybe they don't want to release because why would you not want to release it? But that's just my thought.
That's the only way I could explain that, because if you're talking about the history of the house, most people want to know your ancestry all the way back. So I would think,
yeah, exactly.
I mean, you have a gift here, a house that's been in your family for 142 years. Most people don't have something like that. So it's like, I would want to know everything about it. And when people are so hush hush about that, I can understand the hauntings. There's a lot of places that don't want to get that tag put on them because they see it as being negative or they don't want to bring in the wrong kind of people or what have you. Although they might be able to get that third floor fixed a little bit faster if they were bringing in people to do that. But it does make you wonder, like, what else was going on here? Obviously, there had to be some dark stuff because there were enslaved people there. It doesn't mean that they were mistreating them or anything, but anytime you have people in, keeping other people in bondage, there is a negative effect there. And clearly for the one, I'm not sure exactly what happened there. But now when you're describing this story of him running out of the house in that way and kind of this repetitive motion, it makes you wonder what was going on there. Did he steal something, or he was trying to run from whatever was going on there? It's just lots of questions. But yeah, I don't understand why you wouldn't want to share, how many people had died in the house and, back in the day, they died. That was normal.
Exactly. When I had asked Linda one day, and I was like, well, you said that Miss Henrietta was downstairs and then you saw the black figure dart. I go, do you ever think that maybe Miss Henrietta had done something, or maybe she had, not to be put in that mindset, but maybe she had wronged the slaves, or she was mean to the slaves, or I hate to say that because that's the mean thing to think about, but a lot of times you hear stories about how you have the woman of the house who's a little bit more of a tyrant toward the slaves because they want stuff done a certain way. And Linda goes, she goes, I hate to think like that, but I kind of do think maybe that one she was a little bit more harsher on because he was one of 3 males that were actually enslaved in the house, and the rest of them were women and children that they had enslaved. So it's the thought process. I don't know how true that is, but it's something that I kind of always keep in the back of my mind.
That staircase in there is very cool.
It's beautiful.
That looks like it's been refurbished for sure. I just love all these pictures that you sent me. A lot of the, the ceiling work with the chandeliers and the medallions that are on the ceiling. Those all look like they've been refurbished.
And there was one time I was able to get, and I didn't take a picture, and I knew that my phone wouldn't have done it justice. There was the cross space where the back doors they had open because I think they were getting rid of a section of termites on the doors. So they had both doors open and you had a little bit of a cross breeze. And I think it was 10-ish. So the sun was still coming up and it had hit the chandelier just right to where the whole room just sparkled. And I just stood there and I was like, I feel like Cinderella right now.
Oh, wow. How neat.
They have lots of fireplaces too. Looks like most of the main rooms have them. This one is really cool. Is this like a marble mantelpiece or something? This one?
The one with the green?
Yeah, so that's what they used to do. I think once the family members started to die off, they would not close off the fireplace, but they would section them off and they would put, especially in Charleston, that's a really, really big thing, is they would put like marble slabs in the fireplaces to kind of help with like the bats. We have a lot of fruit bats.
Oh, sure.
And I think in the 1825, the Spanish dropped off a huge, they call it a huge pile of fruit bats. So that's how we got all of our fruit bats here in Charleston. So I think in downtown Charleston, because of so many chimneys, the bats would live in the chimneys because it was a little bit cooler during the summertime and then a little bit warmer during the winter because of the bricking. They would put the stonework in the fireplace to help keep the bats from coming inside the house if those rooms weren't necessarily being full-time used, I guess. That's how it was explained to me, but
very cool.
Neat.
Yeah, I just love all these pictures that you sent. And usually you're like, oh, I wanted to get all refurbished and, polished up and everything. But I really do like the way they did it because it's like the floors, obviously, they've taken care of the floors because you need to have good floors for people to be walking on. But it's kind of cool because you walk in and you see all this really nice furniture and some of the stuff's been refurbed. And then you look at the walls and it's like, well, they haven't been painted and they're kind of peeling. But it does give you that, like, you've stepped into, like you said, it's kind of like you're in between worlds there, almost in between times.
Yeah. Now, if you go to the rest of the houses, they call it the mansion tour. So there's probably 15, 20 houses that you can go tour. Now, the Aiken-Rhett House is the only house in Charleston that has not been, beside, I think, the Aiken House and then the Drayton House that's on Highway 61 going into Charleston from where I live in Somerville. Those are the only 2 houses, or mansions, whatever you want to call them, that have only been 25% restored. The rest of the houses in Charleston have been up to 100% restored. So they're not the full houses that were lived in. But the Drayton Hall house and the Aiken-Rhett House are the only two that if you were to walk into were as they were when the families lived in them in the 1800s.
Love it. Have you been in the other one as well?
I have, and I mean, they're cool, but they kind of feel stuffy. That's just kind of the best way I can describe it. And I don't know if it's just because it's like the false pretense of, oh, this is what it looked like. But then I went to one house and then I went back to the Aiken house and I was like, I forget what house. It's one of the bigger houses. And I go, I don't think that's really how they lived. I think how the Aiken house looks like, I think this is more how their lifestyle living as compared to what you see the houses now that are fully historically restored. I'm like, I don't know. They feel stuffy and they're pretty. They're gorgeous. I love walking through them. Great history to learn. And I think now that I'm older and, I hated learning history when I was a kid, but now that I'm older and I'm kind of like, oh, this is cool. Like so many different stories, but then I just keep getting drawn back to the Aiken house. And I don't know, even though it's fallen apart, I still think it's very gorgeous. And you really get to see how people lived back then compared to how we live now.
Well, the house is definitely connected to you, which is maybe why you had the experience there that you did. Yeah, I think I've been through two of the fancier places that are downtown, and it seems like one of them, I can't remember the names of them either. I think one started with Nathaniel or something.
Nathaniel House. I think that was across the street from the Charleston Museum.
I want to break in here to talk a little about the Nathaniel Russell House. If you're in Charleston, you have to tour this mansion. The free-flying 3-story staircase that is inside is an architectural marvel. The staircase supports itself as it winds up in a cantilevered way, meaning it's fixed at only one end. It's kind of like you stick your arm out, your shoulder's connected to you, but your hand is out free-floating. That's what cantilevered means. And it's truly mind-blowing. And it has lasted all these years. The mansion is at 51 Meeting Street and was built by its namesake who owned 18 slaves. The rest of the mansion is very unique with geometrically shaped rooms and elaborate plasterwork ornamentation. It's really gorgeous. If there's a mansion that you're going to see here other than the Aiken-Rhett mansion, put this one on your list.
And what I liked about the Aiken house is they were big readers. And again, as I think now that I'm getting older, I'm like to read more. And I think when I was a kid, I was like, I don't want to read. And I was talking to Linda. She wasn't really doing the tour for me, but she was walking with me as she kind of just gave me a free tour because I was literally, again, the only one in the house and she had nothing else to do. And she was telling me that between William Sr. and William Jr., they had a book collection over 2,000 pieces and that they had owned throughout their lifetime. So at any given point, there was anywhere from 250 to 275 books in the Aiken house in their small library. And I was like, I would have given anything to sit there and read all those books, but they're still all preserved and they're in like log cabinets, and the cabinets are aerated so the pages won't fall apart. But there's actually 4 different Edgar Allan Poe books in that bookcase that he had gifted to Henrietta Jr. because somehow they knew each other through something or somewhere. The story was confusing, so I got lost about halfway through. So he had actually given William Jr. 4 of his handwritten books.
Very cool.
Wow.
How neat.
I thought you would like that, Diane, because you're
total treasure.
Yeah. You definitely would want to protect those because those would definitely be worth something.
Yeah.
Even having that amount of books in a home would have been a luxury because it took a lot to print those out and stuff.
And I thought I was a big reader. I mean, I have a huge amount of books and I have 2 Kindles that are maxed out on books. And I'm like going, I wonder you have the time to read that many books.
Yeah,
but
seriously.
I guess back then, like the husband pretty much delegated everything. So you had all the time in the world to sit there and read. I'm like, I was born in the wrong era. I want to sit there and read all day and not have to worry about anything. But hey, to each their own.
True.
Well, Savannah, thank you so much for bringing this to our attention. And the fact that you've had your own experiences there is a huge plus, and that experience that you had included a full-bodied apparition.
Yeah.
Wow.
Thank you for having me.
The Aiken-Rhett House was a place of opulence and parties, but also one deeply connected to one family. Perhaps that is why there are spirits still here. Is the Aiken-Rhett House haunted?
That is for you to decide. definitely want to check this out because, as I said in the episode, I've been to a couple of the refurbished and very fancy mansions that they have there, but I would like to see one that has been just preserved, basically, is what they're doing there. Is keeping it so that, it's safe for people to tour it, but it's pretty much the way that it's, was left by the family.
Original state.
The interesting thing is when she described that there's like that shadow figure that runs in the house and goes out those shutter doors, because we looked at pictures later. And to give people an idea, these are almost like if you were to watch like barn doors that open out, that's how these shutters are. And they are very large. And apparently there were stairs that had come down from there. So this was almost kind of like a back door that you could maybe go out.
Right.
And you have this figure that it seems like it's residual because a lot of people see it running and going out those shutters and those shutters opening and closing. And that is where supposedly that slave hanged himself. Did he hang himself? Or was it an accident that he got caught up in something and got hanged? Or
yeah, I don't know how he could accidentally get something wrapped around his neck. But
yeah, I don't know. I mean, kids hang from blinds and stuff. So I don't know if there was something looped around it or... So I don't know. It's interesting. So I don't know if it was an accident, if he did hang himself on purpose. And, of course, we were surmising why would he be running? And it seems like the lady was kind of after him. It's like we're watching a scene. There's some emotion connected there that has frozen that scene into that house.
Definitely.
So, yeah, I would definitely like to know more information. And maybe that's why the family doesn't want a lot of information out there, because it is something that you don't really want to have out there. But Charleston is great for mansions, and I really want you to get out there to see some of the other ones, too.
Me too. Let's go.
We'd love to have you guys check out our website at historygoesbump.com. And if you'd like to send us some feedback, you can do that at historygoesbump@gmail.com. I want to thank you for joining us on this episode. I've been your host, Diane.
And this has been Kelly.
You take care now. Bye-bye. This episode is brought to you by our executive producers.
Dispatches from the Grave Digger.
We want to thank Melissa Smithdeal for raising your contribution. We'll be moving you under an obelisk tombstone.
Thank you so much for supporting History Goes Bump.
Check out the website at historygoesbump.com.
The captain, his second in command, and a singular.
A singular
person.
A singular signaler.
I need to clean my glasses. They sent flares and rockets off at regular intervals. It was regular intervals. With that, the captain exclaimed, "Lads, this is the last. All hands for themselves, and may God bless you and guide you to safety." Holy crap, when your captain says that, you're in trouble. You're on your own.
No, he was just telling them to go ahead and take care of yourselves.
One of the lifeboats known as
I think it's a penis. Pee at my penis.
Okay, well, I don't know if that's going to make it into the bloopers, Kelly. I was trying to look up how to say Pinnace, which is penis. And Kelly apparently thinks with the proper accent, it could sound like a male body part. Thank you, Kelly, for that lesson today.